Sometimes it takes only a story to bring the heart to stillness. A bell, a dream, or simply the rhythm of your breath. You don't have to do anything, just listen. Let each word, each sound guide you gently back home to yourself. First story: The Gatekeeper of Time. Long ago, deep in the forest, there stood a temple called the Temple Between Two Breaths. It was said that anyone who sought to enter had to pass through a great stone gate, but it could not be opened by hand. It would open only when the traveler knew how to stop. A young man named Kai, weary after years of searching for knowledge, came upon the gate. There was no one there, only moss-covered stone. He knocked. No answer. He pushed. It did not move. He shouted, "I seek to enter and find the truth." Only the echo replied, "The truth, the truth." Exhausted, he sat down and sighed. As his breath slowed and his mind grew still, he heard the sound of stone shifting. The gate slowly opened. A gentle voice from within said, "I do not guard time, I guard the heart. When your heart stops wandering, time reveals itself." Kai stepped through, tears on his face. He realized it was not the gate that opened, it was himself. Second story: The Dream of the Hill. Upon a misty hill stood an ancient Bodhi tree, over 1,000 years old. They said whoever slept beneath its branches would dream of their own life, but not as they expected. A young woman named Han, grieving her mother's death, came to seek peace. That night, she dreamt she was a seed, falling into soft soil, enduring rain and storm, cracking open, sprouting upward. Then one day, when she had grown tall, a fierce wind broke her stem. In her dream, she wept, "Why must I suffer?" A voice rose from the earth. "No one makes you suffer. You are simply growing." When she awoke, her cheeks were wet, but her heart was light. She understood. What is lost never truly disappears. It only changes form, from mother to memory, from memory to love, and from love to peace. From that day on, Han stopped seeking peace. She became peace.
Story 3: The Bell and the Wind. In a small seaside temple hung an ancient bell, silent for centuries, except when the wind passed through. Sometimes it rang brightly, sometimes it stayed still. A young monk once asked his teacher, "Master, why does the bell stay silent when the wind is strong, but sing when the breeze is gentle?" The teacher smiled. "When the wind is too strong, the bell is swept away. When the wind is too weak, it barely moves. Only when the wind and the bell move as one, the sound is born." Then he added, "So it is with us. When your heart is too restless, you are carried away. When too still, you do not live. Only when you move with life, not against it, not fleeing it, does the true sound arise within you." Since that day, every evening, the young monk sat listening to the bell, not to its sound, but to the silence before the sound, where wind and bell meet, where life and heart are one. Story 4. The Potter and the Cracked Vase. Long ago, in a quiet village, there lived an old potter known for his flawless craftsmanship. His vases were so perfect that people treated them as treasures. But among them was one he never sold, a vase with a long crack running from its rim to its base. One day, his apprentice asked, "Master, why do you still keep this one? It's broken." He smiled gently. "Because this is the only vase that ever taught me something truly important." He explained. Years ago, when he was young, he demanded perfection. If even the smallest crack appeared, he would shatter the pot and start again. But one day, as he carried a cracked vase to discard, he passed through his garden. The water leaking from it dripped along the path. And days later, small flowers bloomed there where the drops had fallen. Then he realized, a crack is not the end. Sometimes it is the path through which light and life flow. Since then, he kept the vase on his work table as a silent teacher. Whenever his hands trembled or his mind grew anxious, he looked at it and smiled. Nothing needs to be perfect. It only needs to be open enough for life to pass through. Story 5. The Gatekeeper and the Thief. At the foot of a mountain stood an ancient temple. Each night, the old gatekeeper sat in silence, meditating beside the wooden gate weathered by time. One night, a thief slipped into the courtyard. He searched around, and there was nothing to steal except an old bowl and a flickering oil lamp. Just as he was about to leave, the gatekeeper said softly, "My friend, don't rush off. The night is cold. Take my cloak. It will keep you warm." Startled, the thief hesitated, then accepted the cloak. The old man smiled. "When you came here seeking something, all I have is my heart. Please, take that with you too." The thief said nothing and disappeared into the dark. The next morning, the gatekeeper looked up at the sky and whispered, "I wish I could have given him the moon, so he would never have to search in darkness again." Years passed. One night, the thief returned, now an old man, bent and gray, but with gentle eyes. He knelt before the gatekeeper and said, "I wandered everywhere, but I only remember one night. The night a man gave me his cloak without asking my name. I carried that kindness my whole life." The gatekeeper smiled and said, "When you receive compassion, you become compassion." That night, the full moon bathed the gate in silver light. They sat together in silence, for there was nothing left to say, only the quiet glow between two awakened hearts.
Story 6. The Traveler and the Mirror of the Lake. Long ago, a traveler set out in search of truth. He crossed high mountains and wide rivers, seeking wisdom from sages and monks across the land. Each gave him an answer, yet none brought him peace. The farther he traveled, the more lost he felt. One evening, he reached a crystal-clear lake hidden in a forest of pines. Exhausted, he knelt to drink, and in the still water, he saw his reflection, tired, thin, uncertain, carrying a quiet sorrow. He gazed at it for a long time. A breeze rippled the surface, the image disappeared. Then, as the water settled again, his face returned, calm, still, and peaceful. In that moment, he understood. I have traveled so far only to return to where I once stood. I have asked so many questions only to hear my own silence. He stopped seeking. He simply sat beneath the trees, watching clouds drift and leaves fall, breathing softly, for he had finally found the path within himself. Story 7. Two Monks and the Girl by the River. Two monks were traveling together along a mountain path. After a heavy rain, the road was muddy and a river ahead was flowing swiftly. By the river stood a young woman in a silk dress, unable to cross. The elder monk looked at her kindly and said, "Let me help you." He lifted her, carried her across, and gently set her down on the other side. Then the two monks continued their journey in silence. Hours passed. The younger monk grew restless and finally said, "Master, we monks shouldn't touch women. Why did you carry her?" The elder smiled and replied, "I put her down by the river, but you're still carrying her in your mind." The younger monk stopped, stunned. He realized that burdens don't live in our hands, they live in our thoughts. From that day on, whenever an attachment arose, he remembered those words, breathed deeply, and smiled, letting the river within him flow clear again. Story 8. Hot Tea and the Present Moment. One early morning, a Zen master invited his young student for tea. They sat across from each other as steam rose from the teapot. The student began talking endlessly. "Master, I want to know how to find peace. I've read sutras, I meditate, I pray, yet my mind is still restless. I'm afraid I'll never reach enlightenment." The master said nothing. He poured tea into the student's cup, filled it to the brim, and kept pouring. The tea overflowed on the table. "Master," the student cried, "the cup is full. You can't pour any more." The master put down the teapot and said softly, "Your mind is the same. It's already full of thoughts, fears, and plans. How can peace be poured into a cup that's already overflowing?" The student fell silent. They sat quietly, watching the steam rise between them. After a while, the master said, "Drink it. Don't think about tea. Don't think about enlightenment. Just feel the warmth in your hands. That is meditation. That is peace." The student took a sip. The tea was simple, yet somehow, in that moment, the whole universe seemed to dissolve into its warmth. Story 9. The Seed in Winter. A young monk asked his master, "Master, I meditate every day, yet my mind is still restless. I want enlightenment now, to see the truth immediately." The master led him to a snowy garden and said, "Plant a seed here." The monk hesitated. "But it's winter, it won't grow." The master smiled. "Yes, but if you don't plant it now, when spring comes, nothing will bloom." So the monk planted the seed in the frozen ground. Days passed. Nothing changed, until one morning the snow melted and a tiny green sprout reached toward the sun. The master said, "All growth takes time. Patience isn't waiting idly, it's trusting in silence that everything is quietly blooming." Story 10. The Water Carrier and the Morning Light. Every morning, a man carried 2 buckets of water from the stream to his village. One bucket was perfect, the other had a crack. Each day when he arrived home,
The cracked bucket was only half full. Ashamed, the cracked bucket said, "I'm sorry, I waste your effort. I'm broken and useless." The man smiled gently. "Tomorrow, watch the path we walk." The next morning, as they walked the familiar trail, the cracked bucket saw wildflowers blooming along its side of the road. The man said, "Those flowers grow because of the water you spilled each day. I picked them to offer on the Buddha's altar. Even with cracks, each of us can bring beauty into the world." The bucket fell silent, and for the first time, it smiled at the sound of water dripping from its side. Story 11. The Lantern in the Storm. One night, a fierce storm struck. Wind howling, thunder roaring, rain pounding the temple roof. Terrified, the young monks rushed to their master's room. "Master, the storm is everywhere. We're frightened." The Zen master smiled, took a small lantern, and stepped outside. The wind whipped around them. The flame flickered, nearly going out. Yet he shielded it carefully with his trembling hand. "Tell me," he said, "what do you see?" "Master, the light is almost gone." He replied softly, "The storm outside is only part of life. The storm within, that is what makes us forget the light." He lifted the lantern higher. The flame still burned. The wind may howl, the rain may fall, but if your hand stays mindful, the light will never die. By morning, the sky was clear. One novice whispered, "Master, has the storm passed?" The master smiled. "The storm never truly came. It only passed through your heart." Story 12. The Old Robe and the Stranger. One cold morning, a beggar stood outside the temple gate, shivering, clothes torn. A young monk saw him and hurried to his master. "Master, there's a man outside freezing and hungry. Should I give him food and a robe?" The master nodded. The monk searched, but found only the master's old, worn robe. "Master, this is yours." The teacher smiled. "Then it's perfect." When someone is cold, warmth belongs to them. When someone is hungry, food belongs to them. Nothing truly belongs to us. We only hold things long enough to share. That evening, the beggar returned, tears in his eyes. "Thank you. Your robe saved my life." The master replied, "It wasn't my robe that saved you. It was your own kindness that made it warm." Years later, that same man became one who gave rice to the poor. He still wore that patched old robe, a quiet lantern reminding him, love never grows old. It simply passes from one hand to another. Story 13. The Old Bell and the New Breath. In an old mountain temple hung a bell that had rung for centuries. Every dawn, before the sun rose, the elder monk would strike it once. The sound drifted through the forest, the clouds, and the hearts of those who listened. One day, the novice asked, "Master, why do you still ring that old cracked bell? Its tone isn't clear anymore." The master smiled. "Yes, it's cracked, but the sound still lives. And within that crack, we can hear the truth of impermanence." He struck the bell gently. The tone wasn't perfect, yet it lingered beautifully. "Do you hear it?" "Yes, master." "Impermanence is the same," he said softly. Everything will crack, fade, and fall away. But because of that, we learn to cherish this breath, for it is the living sound of life itself.
From that day, the young monk didn't just hear the bell with his ears, but with his whole heart beating in the present moment. Story 14. The Mother and the Last Leaf. In a small village, an old mother lived with her only son. That winter, he fell gravely ill. Each day he lay in bed, staring out the window at a tree shedding its leaves. He whispered, "Mother, when the last leaf falls, I think I will go too." The mother said nothing, tears in her eyes. That night, she went outside. There was only one leaf left, trembling in the cold wind. She took a needle and thread and tied it gently to the branch. The next morning, snow covered the ground. The son opened his eyes and saw the leaf, still hanging, brave against the storm. He cried softly, "If it hasn't fallen yet, then perhaps I shouldn't give up either." Days passed and his strength returned. When spring came, he walked outside. The leaf was dry, but still clinging to the tree. His mother smiled and said, "Love is the thread that ties us to life. As long as you are loved, you are never truly gone." Story 15. The Grain of Rice in the Monk's Hand. One morning, during alms round, the monk received just a single grain of rice from a poor woman. His young disciple looked sad. "Only one grain, master." The monk smiled and held it in his palm. In this grain lives her whole heart. When gratitude fills the mind, even one grain becomes the whole sky. He later cooked rice from all the small offerings and shared it with everyone. The aroma filled the temple and warmth spread through all hearts. From that day, the novice learned, it is not wealth that brings gratitude. It is gratitude that makes the world abundant. Story 16. The Silence in the Wind. A student once asked his master, "Teacher, how can I hear the voice of the Buddha?" The master said, "Go outside and listen." The student went into the forest. He heard wind, leaves, birds. He returned and said, "I heard only the wind, not the Buddha." The master smiled. The Buddha's voice is the wind. When you stop searching, every sound becomes the teaching. He closed his eyes again. The wind blew once more, and in the silence between the gusts, he heard peace. Story 18. The Moon on Muddy Water. One night, a novice looked into the pond and saw the moon distorted in muddy water. "The moon looks ugly," he sighed. The master beside him said softly, "The moon isn't ugly. The water is muddy." How can I make the moon beautiful again? You don't need to do anything, the master said. Just let the water settle. The novice waited silently. As the water cleared, the moon became whole once more. When the mind is still, the world becomes clear. Story 19. The Candle and the Darkness. Someone asked a Zen master, "How can I drive away the darkness inside my heart?" The master lit a candle and said, "You can't chase away darkness with your hands. You only need to bring light." The small flame illuminated the whole room, and he understood. You don't fight sadness. You simply shine kindness upon it. Story 20. The raindrop returns to the sea. A raindrop fell from the cloud, afraid of where it would end up. It asked the wind, "Will I disappear forever?" The wind smiled. "Don't fear. When you dissolve, you are only returning home." The raindrop touched the ocean, and in that instant, it was no longer a drop, but the sea itself. When we let go of the small self, we return to the vastness that has always been us.
Story 20. The Leaf That Did Not Fly Away. A leaf trembled on its branch and asked the wind, "Where will you take me?" The wind replied, "I only help you let go. You will choose where you fall." The leaf gazed down at the ground, where countless others rested peacefully, becoming soil. It smiled, drifted gently down, and whispered, "Falling is just another form of returning." When we stop fearing change, every ending becomes a beginning. Story 21. The Cloud's Tear. A cloud asked the sun, "Why must I cry as rain? Isn't crying a sign of weakness?" The sun smiled warmly. "No, dear cloud, crying is your way of returning. Rain makes flowers bloom, rivers rise, and people smile." The cloud understood and wept freely, and in every drop there was gratitude for being alive, for loving, and for belonging to everything. Story 22. The Bell Within the Heart. A traveler came to a temple and said, "I heard the bell here awakens people. Please let me hear it." The Zen master led him to the altar where the bell hung silently. He didn't strike it. He asked, "Do you hear it?" The traveler shook his head. The master smiled. "The true bell doesn't ring outside. When your mind is still, it rings from within." That night, the traveler sat in silence. And when his breath aligned with his heartbeat, he finally heard the bell, not with his ears, but with his soul. Story 24. The Bird's Shadow on the Lake. A bird flew over a lake and saw its shadow rippling on the surface. It tried to chase it, but the faster it flew, the blurrier it became. A fish below called out, "You can't catch your shadow. To see clearly, you must stop." The bird landed on a branch. The water stilled, and the shadow became whole. It smiled, for at last it saw itself. Story 25. The Bamboo Planter and Time. A young man asked the master, "I've been trying every day, but I see no progress." The master pointed to the bamboo grove. "In the first year, nothing grows. The second year, still nothing. But in the 5th year, it shoots up within weeks. All that time, it was growing roots. He looked at the young man and said, "You too are growing roots. Every effort becomes strength. Just be patient." Story 25. The Flower That Bloomed in the Dark. A traveler lost his way in the forest at night, frightened and weary. He sat down on a stone and whispered, "There is no light left for me." As his eyes adjusted to the dark, he saw before him a tiny flower blooming, releasing a soft fragrance. Tears fell from his eyes. Even in darkness, something still chooses to bloom. From that night on, whenever sorrow came, he no longer ran. He knew the darkest places are where patience begins to grow. Story 26. The Ember and the Flame. A novice complained while tending the fire. "The coals are cold, master. I see no flame." The Zen master said, "Blow gently." The novice did, and the fire came alive. "Was the fire still there?" he asked. The master nodded. "Always. One breath of compassion is enough to awaken it. So too with the human heart. Even when cold, one mindful breath can reignite love." Story 27. The Old Mirror in the Temple. In the temple was an old mirror, scratched and dim. The novice said, "This mirror shows nothing clearly." The master smiled. "It's not the mirror that's dull, only the dust of time upon it." They cleaned it together, slowly, patiently, until the surface shone once more. The master said, "Your heart is the same. Don't search for light. Just wipe away the dust of worry." Story 28. The Boat Without an Anchor. A man rowing a small boat was swept away by the waves. Panicking, he shouted, "I've lost control!" An old man on the shore called out, "Your boat drifts because it has no anchor. Find the anchor within your mind." The man closed his eyes, breathed deeply, and realized the waves were still waves, but his heart was calm. When the mind anchors in mindfulness, every storm becomes part of the ocean's song. Story 30. The Gardener and the Spring Within. A gardener sighed. "This year the cold lingers. The flowers refuse to bloom." The master replied, "Don't wait for spring outside. Plant one within yourself." "Plant it with what?" the gardener asked. "With faith, gratitude, and a calm breath," the master said. From then on, even in winter snow, the gardener smiled as he watered the soil, for he knew spring had never truly left his heart. Story 31. The Heavy Bag and the Long Path. A traveler crossed the desert, carrying a very heavy bag. One day, exhausted, he fell to his knees under the burning sun. An old man on the shore called out, "What's in your bag?" The traveler replied, "Gold, jewels, everything I've gathered in my life." The master smiled softly. "The road you walk does not need gold. It only needs light feet." Hesitant, the traveler opened the bag and began dropping the treasures one by one. Each time he let go something, the wind blew a little freer. When the bag was empty, he walked again and realized the path had never looked so beautiful. When we let go, we lose nothing. We simply learn how to walk freely again. Story 31. The Mason and the Final Brick. A mason had spent years building a temple. Every brick was placed with care. Only one brick remained, slightly crooked. He tried again and again to make it perfect. A monk passing by said, "The temple is already complete. Only your heart is still unfinished." The mason paused, then smiled. He placed the final brick and stopped striving. The wind carried a bell's soft tone, as if his heart had just been built too. Story 32. The River and the Last Drop. The river cried to the sea, "I've traveled far through mountains and stones, but never found peace." The sea replied, "You have already arrived. You just haven't dissolved yet." The river grew silent. As it merged into the ocean, all suffering disappeared. It was no longer a river. It had become the boundless sea. Story 33. The Song in the Night. A monk couldn't sleep. His mind was too loud. His master told him, "Go out and listen to the night." In the darkness, he heard a single bird singing. That one sound made him weep. The next morning he said, "Master, I heard the first song of silence." The master smiled. When the mind is still, even the smallest sound becomes the Dharma. Story 34. The Light in the Dark Room. A man had lived his whole life in darkness. He feared the light. One day, someone opened the door, a ray slipped in. It burned his eyes, and he wanted to turn away. But slowly, he opened his eyes again. The light no longer hurt him. It warmed him. Light doesn't harm us. It only touches what we've never dared to see. Story 35. The Ember in the Ashes. A young monk felt his inner fire fading. He told his teacher, "I've lost my passion for practice." The teacher handed him a handful of cold ashes. He said, "Look closely." Inside the ashes glowed a tiny ember. "One mindful breath," said the master, "and the fire lives again." From then on, whenever he felt weary, he returned to the breath, where the flame had never truly died. Story 31. The Mason and the Final Brick. A mason had spent years building a temple. Every brick was placed with care. Only one brick remained, slightly crooked. He tried again and again to make it perfect. A monk passing by said, "The temple is already complete. Only your heart is still unfinished." The mason paused, then smiled. He placed the final brick and stopped striving. The wind carried a bell's soft tone, as if his heart had just been built too. Story 32. The River and the Last Drop. The river cried to the sea, "I've traveled far through mountains and stones, but never found peace." The sea replied, "You have already arrived. You just haven't dissolved yet." The river grew silent. As it merged into the ocean, all suffering disappeared. It was no longer a river. It had become the boundless sea. Story 33. The Song in the Night. A monk couldn't sleep. His mind was too loud. His master told him, Go out and listen to the night." In the darkness, he heard a single bird singing. That one sound made him weep. The next morning he said, "Master, I heard the first song of silence." The master smiled. When the mind is still, even the smallest sound becomes the Dharma. Story 34. The Light in the Dark Room. A man had lived his whole life in darkness. He feared the light. One day, someone opened the door, a ray slipped in. It burned his eyes, and he wanted to turn away. But slowly, he opened his eyes again. The light no longer hurt him. It warmed him. Light doesn't harm us. It only touches what we've never dared to see. Story 35. The Ember in the Ashes. A young monk felt his inner fire fading. He told his teacher, "I've lost my passion for practice." The teacher handed him a handful of cold ashes. He said, "Look closely." Inside the ashes glowed a tiny ember. "One mindful breath," said the master, "and the fire lives again." From then on, whenever he felt weary, he returned to the breath, where the flame had never truly died.
Story 36. The Crack in the Pot. Once, a man carried water from the river to his village every day. He had 2 clay pots slung on a pole, one perfect, the other cracked. Each trip, the cracked pot arrived only half full. It felt ashamed and broken. One day it said, "Please replace me. I can't carry water like the other pot." The man smiled softly. "Look at your side of the path." The pot saw wildflowers blooming all along its way, bright and alive. "Because of your crack, these flowers live. You've watered beauty without even knowing." From then on, the pot no longer wished to be perfect. It learned that perfection is not being flawless. It's loving even the cracks within ourselves. Story 37. The Leaf That Let Go. High on a branch, a leaf trembled in the late wind. It knew the moment of falling was near. Fear filled its heart. Fear of losing the sun. Fear of never touching the sky again. "I'm not ready," it whispered. The wind replied softly, "No leaf falls in vain. When you let go, you return to the soil, the place where all life begins." The leaf closed its eyes and surrendered to the breeze. When it touched the ground, it was no longer just a leaf, but part of the forest's breath, part of the circle of life. Only when we let go do we realize we've never truly lost anything. Story 38. The River and the Stone. Once, a stone lay in the middle of a stream, hard and cold. The water flowed around it each day, gentle yet persistent. The stone scoffed, "You're so weak, you have no shape of your own." The river smiled, "It's my softness that gives me strength." Years passed, the stone grew smooth, its edges worn away. The river remained pure, ever flowing. Then the stone whispered, "Now I see. Strength is not about resisting, but knowing when to yield." Story 39. The Wind and the Wind Chime. The wind asked the wind chime, "Why do you always sing when I touch you? Can't you just stay still like the others?" The chime replied, "Because this is how I honor your presence. I can't stop the wind, I can only sing with it." The wind fell silent. From that day, It passed gently through the chime, creating the softest melody in the quiet night. Story 40. The Gardener and the Seed. A gardener planted a seed in dry soil. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing grew. He began to doubt, perhaps this seed has died. Still, he watered it faithfully. One dawn, under soft rain, a tiny green sprout appeared. The seed whispered, "I was never gone. I was finding my way through the darkness." Story 41. The Shadow and the Light. A shadow always followed a man, feeling forgotten and unwanted. One night, it asked the lamp, "Why do you always make me disappear?" The lamp smiled, "I don't erase you, I reveal you. Without light, no one would ever know what shadow is." From then on, the shadow stopped hating the light. It understood both darkness and light belong to the same truth. Story 42. The Tear that Became a Lake. A girl cried every night for her loss. Each tear carried her pain and memories. She asked a monk, "Master, when will I stop crying?" The monk smiled, catching a raindrop from a leaf. "Water only changes form, my dear. Your tears will one day become a stream, a lake, where others will see themselves and heal." That night she cried again, but softly this time, for she knew that every tear now had meaning.
Story 43. The Potter and the Broken Vase. A master potter once had a vase crack during firing. His apprentice asked, "Will you throw it away, master?" The potter shook his head and filled the crack with golden resin. Under the sunlight, the repaired line shimmered beautifully. "This crack tells its story," he said. "Because it broke, it became unique." Story 44. The Traveler and the Heavy Bag. A traveler walked endlessly, weary and restless. On his back was a heavy bag. He met a monk and said, "I'm so tired, I can't go any further." The monk smiled and said, "Open your bag and see what you carry." Inside were stones, memories, regrets, old fears. One by one, he set them down. The lighter he became, the farther he could go. He realized the path was never too long, only his heart was too heavy. Story 45. The Flower that Didn't Wait for Spring. In the cold of winter, a tiny bud tried to bloom. Other flowers laughed. "Why not wait for spring? The sun will be warmer then." The bud whispered, "If I keep waiting, I'll forget how to live in the cold." By morning, the snow around it had melted, for its courage had brought warmth where no sun could reach. Story 46. The Bell in the Night. In a small temple on the mountain, the bell rang every midnight. A traveler asked the monk, "Who do you ring the bell for when no one is awake?" The monk smiled and said, "I ring it for those still dreaming, not with their eyes, but with their hearts. Those who are awake don't need the sound, for the bell already rings within them." Story 47. The Mirror in the Rain. An old mirror hung on a porch. For years, it reflected the faces of those who passed by. Until one rainy day, mud splashed and covered it. The owner wanted to throw it away, but a child said, "Don't. Just wipe it clean." When the mirror was cleaned, it reflected not just faces,
but the whole sky and raindrops merging into one. I never lost my light, thought the mirror. I was only covered by dust. Story 48. The River of Forgiveness. Every day, a man stood by the river, throwing stones into the water, angry at himself. A monk passing by asked, "Why do you do that?" The man said, "I want to cast away my guilt." The monk looked at the flowing river and said, "The river keeps no stone. It carries them gently away. If you wish to forgive, learn to flow like the river." Story 49. The moment when nothing is left to do. A student asked his master, "How long must I meditate to find peace?" The master replied, "Until you stop trying to find it." The student was puzzled. The master said, "Every effort to be calm is still movement of the mind. When you sit without effort, no wanting, no chasing, no holding, peace comes on its own." That night, the student sat quietly, without asking for anything. Tears fell, yet he didn't wipe them. For the first time, he felt he was home. Story 50. When everything dissolves. An old man sat by the sea, watching the waves wash away the sand castle he built with his grandchild. The child cried, "Grandpa, everything's gone." The old man smiled, holding the child's hand. "No, my dear, the sea takes nothing. It only gives back what we forget to see." As the tide receded, they saw tiny shells glimmering beneath the sand, gifts left behind for those who can wait.